Good evening, Minister. Welcome to Business Today.
Good evening.
Indeed. Let's start with the most recent price adjustment on fuel here in Namibia. What were the key changes, and what were the factors that drove these adjustments?
Of course, we all now understand that the oil market is controlled by the global market, and that involves the price per barrel, for instance. Now, in the time of conflicts like we are experiencing now from the Middle East, where most of the countries used to source their oil from, in the case of Namibia, we used to buy from the United Arab Emirates, as well as Saudi Arabia and Oman sometimes. But we also buy from the EU countries and India. Now, that conflict has actually diverted the routes and also shift the point of sales, where people started buying from, instead of buying from the Middle East, they started buying now, say, maybe all their consignments from the EU countries and India. And now looking at the routes that they have to take to ship the oil from those refineries to reach Walvis Bay has influenced the end price at the end of the day, especially to the end user. Of course, through the value chain. And we have also experienced an increase in the demand. The demand and supply rule is now applying when people are buying fuel, because people are demanding fuel from the limited sources or refineries. And as a result, that has also now caused the rising of the price. We have recently observed the price increase with as much as 122.1% from the previous prices. So that also had impact on our pricing when we have to calculate at the end of the month to see how we can regulate our pricing for the successive month, because that's a practice that we do here in Namibia.
Right.
And when we evaluate all those factors, we realize that indeed our suppliers are disadvantaged by the crisis, and therefore we have to come in and increase the prices, but also mitigate the impact of the increase on the end user by allocating certain funds from the government side to cushion in, so that the end user doesn't pay the whole price.
All right. That sort of brings me to the National Energy Fund. Namibians are used to being buffered from the true price. But what's the status of the National Energy Fund currently? Is it well funded? And will it be able to subsidize high fuel prices in case this war in the Middle East pushes prices further to uncontrollable levels?
Of course, the National Energy Fund is an existing fund that has always been funding oil. The fact that we have not been increasing doesn't mean that there were no gaps that government had to fill in to come in and cushion in to save the end user from incurring that price. Right. So we have always been funding, maybe not to the tune that we are funding now, but government have always assist the end users from paying higher prices at the pump. So using the National Energy Fund, that is actually the difference between what the wholesalers are asking and what the retailers have to ask to transfer to the end user. So what we do is actually to see how we can attend to filling that gap between the price of the end user and the price of the wholesaler to the dealer. So that is the gap that we normally calculate and fill in using money from the National Energy Fund. So it is not a sustainable practice if it's prolonged. Our understanding is that perhaps the war would not continue forever, or maybe not for too long. But as a measure, an immediate measure, we thought it's prudent to use the National Energy Fund to at least assist the people who were also not prepared for that unfortunate condition, knowing also our economic levels, and knowing also the problems of unemployment. So we thought it fit definitely in good faith to try to come in and assist our community, the end users at the end.
All right. Perhaps I can ask you just for an update on the current status of Namibia's fuel supply. Are we facing any immediate risks or shortages?
Of course, the risk is something that we cannot undermine. I would say at the moment, we have fuel in our storage. We are also expecting deliveries of fuel. And that gives us confidence to say at least we can still supply. But you see, it depends on how the situation presents itself in the Middle East. If it's too much prolonged, then definitely the impact will be felt by everybody in the world, because this is a global crisis at the moment. So Namibia is not spared from that impact. And our dealers and also the wholesalers are also very much concerned. You see, there are many players in that industry. At the end of the day, the fuel cost is also influenced by not only the competition itself, but also the risk associated with the transportation, the evacuation of oil from the refinery to Walvis Bay, including the associated insurance. You know, the insurance would probably also
so all those hidden
come
costs,
in and of course in that high risk environment, you see, you can imagine how they will also cost or put on certain prices on the normal prices that they normally charge, and that at the end of the day will be transferred to whoever is to consume.
Is next in line.
From that transaction.
All right. Now, Wednesday, prices went up locally. And on Tuesday night, we saw scenarios all over the streets that were quite interesting. You issued a statement on Tuesday where you warned service station owners against creating an artificial fuel shortage. How serious is that practice, and what happens if someone is found to have engaged in such a practice?
Yeah, I should say it's quite concerning moment. We were seriously concerned when we observed queues of cars, you know, trying to fuel before the commencement of the new prices. And of course, that have definitely caused a lot of inconveniences, both to the wholesalers and also to the dealers, because the demand exceeded actually the forecasted volumes with between 30 and 40%, meaning that people were buying actually unusually more than they usually buy. And you see the supply, how it works is that they have scheduled deliveries to say, of course, if I supply you with these volumes of fuel, within a week you should be able to...
It should last you for so long.
Yes, it should last you for so long. But now that didn't happen because fuel started finishing way earlier than anticipated, and it was actually, now the wholesalers had to oversupply. And remember that when they plan on their supply, they plan that this fuel will be supplied for this specific month. For instance, for March, now they ended up also supplying the volumes for April, you know, in March, because of the demand that was too high. And you see, this panic buying is very serious because people started filling drums and tanks.
So it's not just your car as you would normally do.
Yes.
You're storing it and such.
And that increased the consumption. So it was not too much about withholding as we initially thought and as we were informed. We had a meeting yesterday with the wholesalers and dealers, and we could definitely extract the correct information from them because we were ready to take relevant actions against those who would otherwise disobey the laws.
All right. So the fault really is on both sides. You have the service station owners and them that are holding on to the fuel, and then on the other hand, you have panic buyers. So maybe just what's your take on how to solve that situation, since we are still in this in the situation?
Yeah, well, it's a very serious environment because none of them would definitely admit to have committed such an offense, because the dealer would tell you that no, genuinely I just ran out of fuel.
Right.
And the wholesaler would tell you that no, I have supplied to the maximum, even to the extent of, taking a portion from my April supply to supply such on the last day of March. And in fact, the panic buying didn't start on the 31st. Actually, it started way back. I mean, maybe 5 days before.
Okay.
And this was observed throughout the country. And even the dealers, those who have spoken to us, are saying, no, definitely they haven't seen something like this before,
Right.
where the demand exceeded definitely the projected volumes for that specific period of time.
All right.
Of course, we are anticipating that if not well managed, this situation may continue again at the end of the month, because we don't know how the situation in the Middle East will present itself at the end of the day. So it may as well cause any other, decisions to be taken, either to reduce the fuel cost, or maybe to increase, or to maintain it the way it is now. So, this uncertainty may create another panic,
Right.
and maybe again result into panic buying.
All right. So does that mean that authorities are now alerted to the potential and will be checking out both sides of that conflict?
Yeah, definitely. What we have taken some measures to say we have increased the routineness of inspections by our inspectors at the dealer sites, and also having a constant engagement with both the dealers and the wholesalers, and they have appreciated, at least, so that we know what is happening with them, and they know what we expect from them. And we have already started, like I said yesterday, and this engagement will continue until the situation normalizes.
All right. Well, we'll quickly take you to this insert. Let's listen to this following insert, where Business Today producer Daphne Amwelo spoke to economist Hinonwenwa Erastus, who provided insight into the implications of the fuel price hike and Namibia's fuel supply outlook.
Erastus highlighted the multiple transmission channels through which the conflict is affecting Namibia's economy.
So you see, there are so many multiple ways this thing is affecting us. And it's actually exposing our vulnerability in terms of economic and in terms of industrialization and in terms of production capacity that we have. Because we've been talking about industrialization, value addition, but we barely do anything.
He stressed that geopolitical disruptions of this nature expose structural weaknesses, underlining the urgency for Namibia to strengthen its industrial base and improve economic self-reliance.
The most dangerous thing about this situation is that there is no clear end game. When is it coming to the end? And also, if you look around within the supply chain, the alternatives, all the alternative refineries that we have, they get crude from the Middle East, apart from maybe the African ones. Even
the uncertainty surrounding the duration of the conflict continues to raise a critical question. Is Namibia adequately prepared for prolonged disruption?
But given now, in terms of modeling, you have such minimal information for you to make the proper forecasting. So we have to leave it just like that we do not know. So actually we have to prepare in terms of funding and in terms of finding alternative supply, and also some critical measures like what they're doing in Middle East to say certain people should not go to work. Let us use fewer cars on the road. So we have to prepare for all those scenarios because we do not know how far we go.
Last week, the Minister of Industries, Mine and Energy, Modestus Amutse, issued a statement addressing Namibia's fuel supply security. Erastus shared his response to the announcement.
Tata Amutse had a press release, I think, last week to tell us about the supply security, which he didn't. The press release is supposed to be about that, but he didn't. He just said we are fine. Look, when it comes to economics, when it comes to operation, when it comes to production, what is key is information. And in Africa, in Namibia, our policymakers do not understand the value of information. I plan my production according to the information that I have. And if you come out to the public and you do not provide information that can enable me to decide how much to produce, that is very dangerous.
Well, if you just joined us, you are watching this special edition of Business Today. We're discussing the fuel supply situation in Namibia. We'll be back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We continue our discussion with the Minister of Industries, Mines and Energy, Mr. Modestus Amutse. Minister, we just heard from a local economist there just giving his views as to how to run things. Maybe just looking ahead, what long-term strategies does Namibia have in place to pursue, a reduction in our dependence on imported fuel?
Okay, definitely dependence on imported fuel, it's a long-term strategy. But we all know by now that the government have done its best to engage investors in the petroleum sector. We have some companies at the moment that are drilling on offshore. So hoping that towards the end of the day, Namibia would have its own fuel to rely on. But that is not today, unfortunately. We expect probably the first oil to be, production of oil maybe in 2029.
All right.
If it's earlier than that, then it's a bonus, of course, which we welcome. So, but now we have to talk about the immediate problem that is facing us, and that is the oil shortage. So perhaps I would say, when I look at the full supply outlook, I would say, as a government and as a ministry, maybe just to also caution the public to say the risk of continued shortage still remain very high towards the end of April. And that is now comparing to the situation that we have experienced on the 31st of April, on March.
Right.
Particularly if panic buying persists, it will still create that problem. And the geopolitical uncertainties that the economist was also highlighting. So all those pressures will definitely call on us to re-strategize. And we are proposing certain interventions at the moment, which we are testing to see how it will work, if it works out. And I'm happy the economist also mentioned the situation in some countries in the Middle East probably, to say there are certain restraints when it comes to carrying out certain activities,
right,
or participating in certain activities because of the shortage of oil supply. So in Namibia, I would believe perhaps what could help us is to have a controlled rationalization of the sales at service stations, to say when people are buying, perhaps we restrict the use of large containers so that it can not create a situation where the demand would exceed the supply.
Yes,
and
yeah.
Also we are thinking of course, to discourage the public from panic buying. And we say perhaps if we can introduce measures such as to allow people to buy only up to 100 liters, if it's maybe to save for whatever reasonable purpose.
Right.
But when we say 100 liters, we are not referring to vehicles. We are referring actually to the specific people who have, reasonable conditions that need otherwise fuel in a container or somewhere.
Okay.
Maybe we restrict that to 100 liters. And if we say maybe a maximum of 200 liters for farms at a time, maybe if that is necessary. And we are saying where there is a necessity to buy high volumes of fuel, other than what we have observed now, because what we have observed exceeded these numbers, these volumes that are highlighted now. And we are also saying that we have to strengthen our monitoring and compliance when it comes to the industry, the whole industry itself, whether with the suppliers or perhaps with the dealers, so that we have a monthly fuel stock inspections by our petroleum inspectors, and we also to monitor the real-time stock levels by suppliers. We are doing that together between the suppliers and ourselves as a ministry. And another one is also industry coordination. Right. With industry coordination, we are looking at mandatory daily coordination, and that will be between the Ministry of Industries, Mines and Energy, the wholesalers and the dealers. So those are the measures that we have already introduced to the dealers as well and the wholesalers, and they have no problem with it. So that at the end of the day, we manage the situation together, because we don't believe in managing a critical situation such as this one in isolation. Of course, we are managing it government to private sector or private sector to government, so we do it together. And of course, we also want to encourage the users, the motorists, and so that we sing the same song and focus on the same journey.
So is there a real possibility that we could be seeing regulation that sort of enforces or that sort of guides us into that direction, or are we far from something like that?
We already have regulations in terms of the Petroleum Act. You see, in terms of the Act, Section 2, Paragraph A, Roman 2, if you look at that, you see the minister is already empowered to take certain measures. Nice. Regarding the transportation, the management, the sales of oil products. So you see, I wouldn't want to take punitive measures. I would think it's proper that we engage and cooperate, right, and understand the threat facing all of us at the same together. Time. So let's rather be in the same vehicle and see how best we can drive it safe.
All right. Speaking of the same vehicle, what role do regional partnerships, especially in SADC, what role do they play in ensuring fuel security and energy security in Namibia and in the region?
Of course, when it comes to our protocols that govern our relationship between countries, they are very clear. It's to support each other. But then when we find ourselves in situations like these ones, what we can coordinate probably is to see if we can, if the other one is having excess of fuel, there is no harm to coordinate between our countries and see how we can assist each other. For instance, we already do lots of sales of fuel to some of our neighboring countries, such as Botswana and Zambia, for example, but that we do in a very coordinated, mutual beneficiation sort of environment. Right. And this is not created by the current condition that we are experiencing, but is something that has been in existence in terms of our bilateral cooperation and also regional cooperation. But we can also go look at beyond SADC, you see, because when we find ourselves in situations like this, and perhaps it's just the right time to do so, that we also look at other options such as approaching other countries, maybe in the African continent, to see, especially oil-producing countries. Right. And I would tell you that we are, as a government, have already started working on different options. We are still with option 1, but that doesn't prevent us to step to option 2 should the situation so demand. Right. But preparations are well on track.
All right. So the initiative being shown at least might open up some new gateways or some new areas to benefit from.
You see, problems always create new opportunities, and personally, I see this as an opportunity as well, because it's opening up, even our planning for for situations such as this one. You know, when you find yourself in an emergency, you now know, you should know
You've
which
been there.
button to press.
Right.
And this environment definitely, to me, is another opportunity just to
sharpen
make us
ourselves
again
in that sense.
yes.
All right. Maybe just finally then, Minister, if you were to reflect on what lessons Namibia is learning from the geopolitical developments, and how will the ministry implement those lessons in the future?
It is our collective responsibility as Namibians, number one, to support the initiatives that government would bring about and or have already brought about, because it's not that we have been quiet and waiting for the situation to unfold in the Middle East. As a responsible government, we have always been planning to do the best for the country, and that is the reason why, starting with, we have invited and attracted international investors in the oil sector, including our own local investors, the knowledge cutters and others,
Right.
so that we can actually explore our own resources for the benefit of the country. And that is the long-term solution.
All right.
And we are still hard at work, trying to see how we can achieve that level of production of own oil and gas for our own consumption, and indeed to supply the international market. So definitely, and another lesson is just maybe to say, like I say, we have definitely different options. The first option have always been working well, the one
Right.
that we are currently using to supply fuel in the country. But of course, we also knew that there can be time, apart from the other efforts that we are doing, to have our own resources exploited and later on extracted to benefit our economy and our consumption. We always had efforts to also not forgetting that we have other players on the continent itself.
Right.
That can as well come in and supply, and that option is not thrown away.
Right.
It's still on the table, well intact, just waiting for the right moment.
At the moment, I'm sure they're listening now. They're ready to listen.
Yes.
All right. Well,
But of course, we also have other options, such as the bulk supply, you know, which is a situation which we can also, you know, unpack and allow bulk buying of the oil, which will make the price at the end of the day much cheaper.
So creating more depots locally.
Not necessarily to create more depots, but also to buy as a collective. At the moment, the model that the suppliers are using, or the wholesalers are using, is of this nature, that each of them buy individually. And you see, and that would mean then that economically you are buying in a smaller quantity,
right,
as opposed to buying in bulk as a collective.
Right,
that would make your quantity much larger and
Economy
much
of
cheaper,
scale
of course,
working
because
All right.
economic of scale. And so those are other options that are still available.
All right.
And we have already done our homework. So that's why I'm saying we shouldn't panic yet, but we have reasons to be concerned.